that they do it.
Awesome. Stephen, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Awesome. It just works. It's surprising.
Wow, and it's such a clear voice. Did you change your microphone?
Did I change my microphone?
Yeah.
No, it's the same one I've used. It's a little headset thingy.
Wow, really? Like, it's really good quality.
Excellent.
Okay.
Maybe it's all the voice lessons I've been taking.
Okay, so now I just need to find a way to project what I actually want to project. Turns out that's not as easy as you think.
So, Steve, what do you think about the process APIs discussion?
I think the new APIs are nice. I still have trouble with the notion of introducing a new set of APIs, even though the current ones aren't great. They support the same scenarios, and so I struggle with the idea of introducing new ones. I don't completely understand the whole standard plat versus standard lib versus corefx distinction, and so I don't quite know what to make of it. But I like. I mean, in nothing, all other issues aside, the new shape looks nice.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to talk about in general. Is that what we do with our compat story? Because I think in general, like I think we said it before, is we need to think about how we can evolve .NET Core without moving the elephant every single time we add something. But at the same time, there is a lot of contention about what that means. There's a compat effort, and hopefully I can publish something today. And also there's a bunch of threads. You probably saw the threads on GitHub regarding our ADO.NET interfaces. And I think we need to put a bit stronger, foot in the door where we can actually talk about what that looks like and why we're adding APIs and what not adding API means and what our roadmap looks like. And I think once we have that, I think those discussions would hopefully be a bit easier. But I think in general, I don't know, it's hard to evolve something if you can't modify it. And it's also hard to evolve something if you can't add, alternatives, right? And so I think we need to find a way where we can do one or the other. All right, so here's what I projected. Can you share can you see the screen, Stephen?
Yep, I can see it.
So then that works. I can find my cursor. Here it is. Awesome. So
scroll to the bottom. There you go, right there. Okay, so is Pallavi there?
Unfortunately, no. The only people here is Christoph, myself, and you.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Because we don't have many people attending, because Wes does one week boarding.
Yeah, that's fine. So there may be more stuff on console that we want to bring back, but these were the ones that jumped out at me and that I saw being used in a variety of places, including there was a whole discussion around, implementing something like more advanced cursor manipulation as part of doing standard read line stuff. You want to read a line of text and have a history and be able to go back and forth and things you've already typed and whatnot. And if you look at the solutions that are out there that are in C#, they all use things like set cursor position and clear and whatnot.
Yep.
And any kind of standard, any console application that does anything real basically needs all of this stuff. The one exception, and we can talk about this, is buffer width, buffer height. So I threw those in because one particular library was using them, but on Linux, they're just going to return window width, window height. And unless we expose the rest of the buffer-related APIs, which I didn't do, they're sort of meaningless other than to help existing code compile. And you probably also, I think there's also like a buffer left and a buffer top, although I'm not positive. So you'd probably want all of them. But anyhow, these are the ones that I added implementations for to Linux, but I didn't expose them in the contract, and I didn't copy over the Windows implementation from the reference source yet. I think assuming we decide to go ahead with them, Pallavi was going to do both of those things.
So I think, and I talked with Wes about console, I don't know, 100 times at this point. And I think the general consensus that we all agreed with is that we should take a holistic look at console and pretty much add everything except for the ones we don't want to add specifically. Because right now it's basically just the one of, I ran into this guy, he needs this API, let's add this one.
Right, I agree.
Well,
So I think other than sorry, go ahead,
color.
Christoph.
So I don't see on this list the color manipulation.
I think we already added those, right?
They're already there.
No, oh, really?
Yeah.
But
One of the
I
first
thought
things.
there were like two different color APIs. One is you change the color and then you write in a different color.
Yes.
And then there were those where you can actually do like, basically graphics. They are related to the cursor manipulation.
What do you? I mean, like the way our
So
color
the
APIs
only color APIs.
Oh, really? Maybe I forgot. Okay, okay.
The only one that we have, I think that's maybe the one you want, is there's one specific API that does essentially a copy of the buffer, where you can say, take this thing over here and copy it here, or like to do, for example, scrolling without having to redraw the screen.
Okay.
But our color APIs are just you set foreground and background and you just write.
Oh, okay. And what is the cursor left and cursor top?
That's basically the location where you write. So
Yeah, it's the row and column.
I see. That's two. So it's basically like the set cursor position except independent.
Yes.
X and Y.
Correct.
Yeah, it's the getter for set cursor position. I don't know why they're two separate things. But
Okay.
Well, I guess somebody didn't want to introduce a type.
No, it's probably because setting it twice may be expensive, and usually people would want to just move the position.
No, I said we probably exposed two APIs instead of one because nobody wants to introduce a column row data type, right?
I see.
Because otherwise you need a point or something, right?
Yeah.
it'd be nice if we had that because we actually have to, if you want to get the current cursor position, we have to basically do double the work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in general, like every time I write a console app that does something meaningful on the screen, I notice that our console APIs are really slow. Like it's very hard to get flicker-free rendering and scrolling.
You try to write things.
No, what I tried was basically like git diff, but being able to stage individual lines. So it's basically like a text editor that you can scroll, and so you have a current highlighted line, and like those things are relatively expensive. It's not nice.
Yeah, that said, as part of validating the set of APIs on Linux, I did find a few different interesting apps. I found a Space Invaders in C# for the console, and so I have that up and running on Linux using these.
So what's your high score?
That's not implemented, but that has nothing to do with console.
Clearly, we set priorities here. All right. So I think from my point of view, there's nothing wrong with adding those. I think the only thing I would do at this point is like, if you already looked at the console APIs, which ones did you not include? Because I think it would be good to see, here's all of console, which are the ones we haven't added yet? And have we not done it yet because we didn't run in the apps, or do we not add those because we think they're the wrong APIs to add?
So let's do this. I think that makes sense. Let's say we give the thumbs up for all of these except for buffer width, buffer height. Because those two are tied in with some of the other APIs. And then in addition to giving the go-ahead on those, I'll add the remaining list and whether I think we should add or not and why.
Okay, let me just reply and say, looks good, except for, what did you say, buffer width, and buffer height. Because the concern was that they're meaningless basically on Linux. Yeah,
I also need to look. I think that there are a few other buffer-related APIs, and we should probably either add them all or add none of them. And so we just need to go through and look. The only reason I ended up including these two is because there was some code that I was trying to compile as is, and it used them. But that was it.
We should. Well, it is the other way around. And you read all the missing APIs. All right. So then let me actually mark this guy. All right, done.
Okay, so this one the three of us have had email conversations about this for a while.
Yep.
And so I implemented it. I have I didn't put up a PR to follow the API process, but I have it up in a commit. And I'd like to basically add a new library to corefx so that we don't have to put this, into desktop and whatnot. It can just be a separate thing that sits on top of, and it's available everywhere basically, because it just targets .NET 4.5 APIs. So right now I'm proposing a system threading tasks extensions library. We could choose whatever name we want. I'm imagining that in the future, if we were to, for example, add a new like async reader writer lock, maybe it could go in there as well.
Yep.
But right now it would basically just be the ValueTask type and the associated awaiter for it. And then if there's a proposal for Roslyn to be able to have other things in the return type position of async methods, of which this would be one. And so we would also add the necessary builder types to that assembly if that goes ahead.
You could add it to whatever assembly you wanted. What assembly would you add it to?
If there wasn't any concern about bringing it to other implementations and whatnot, I'd put it into system threading tasks.
I agree with that. I mean, we can still edit there, right? We can still support it on desktop. If it's a separate type, we can still do a partial facade if we really wanted to.
Yeah, because kind of like, recently we've had more discussions about this here. It's like, I really don't like how it's kind of twist the architecture and the factoring of our types and libraries because of the, .NET framework desktop issue. I almost think that we should consider doing partial facade, and basically .NET Core would have it the way we would like it.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. The question is, Stephen, like there seems to be people like really jumping on it and that said the savings are huge. Like from what I heard on email, it seems more like this is basically useful in cases where you already have the results computed, right? It doesn't make the general async cheaper, right? Because you basically just wrap an existing task, right?
Right, but it's very helpful in the case where you have a very hot method that usually completes asynchronously every once in a while. That's returning sort of arbitrary values, so it's not easy to predict the value and thus cache them. And in those cases, it can make an absolute huge savings. So it's sort of a niche thing that doesn't impact most cases, but in the few cases that it does, it's huge. So like, for example, we use this in one place in corefx now where it had a gigantic impact in the XML library for the async APIs. But that's the only place we use it. I use it one place in the channels library, although that place that I use it is public. And there were two alternatives, either a much more expensive implementation or a much more convoluted API that required multiple calls to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So you see, like sometimes in the past we avoided async APIs because of the cost of the class task, like binary reader and writer. You don't want to read a byte asynchronously.
Yes.
Do you think that the value tasks improve the situation enough such that you can actually have an async operations on something like a binary reader?
It's still more expensive than the synchronous call, but yeah, it certainly moves in that direction.
But what's the cost in that case? Because if let's say you have the binary reader, right? You already have the buffer, so you just return the byte from the buffer. So you find the position in the buffer, then you return the value task where you with that byte in that position. What's it? Like, I mean, you just have a very thin struct wrapper at that point, right? Like,
but you've got then every time you're accessing that struct, there's a branch, right? You have to check to see whether it contains a task or not. So which path do you want to go down? You're returning basically a double word sized thing from the method rather than the individual character. So there are these additional overheads that they're small, but it's not as cheap as if it was the synchronous case. So yeah.
Well, the question is like, I mean, I think the comparison is you do a task versus you do it synchronously, then the delta may be huge. But if you do the task versus the value task, then the delta between the value task and the task may be much, much bigger than the difference between synchronous and value task, right? So that may still move it into a realm where it's at least from an API standpoint doable.
Yeah, and my only hesitancy with this type, and this doesn't, I absolutely believe we should add it. My only hesitancy with it is that people are going to potentially misuse it. Because in the case where you're usually completing asynchronously, it's pure overhead. Like there's no value to it. No pun intended.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the other question I have is like, I think we briefly talked about this naming convention wise, but I mean, there was another one like value tuple. Like, do we prefix or do we suffix or do we come up with something new?
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion. I like the prefix better. I understand the argument that making it a suffix allows it to show up better in IntelliSense and things like that. Although if you type task in IntelliSense, it's going to narrow it down to the set of things regardless of whether it's a prefix or a suffix. So
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's mostly sorting, but I mean, given that these things usually, I mean, these are types, right? I mean, like for most cases, I would be more worried about, because these are kind of tasks that you don't, it's not APIs you use a lot yourself. They're created on your behalf, right? So you're not instantiating tasks necessarily that much. So I would be more concerned about how it affects signature sorting and stuff like that. But that to me seems more like it's orthogonal, like whether it's prefix or suffix, both work.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion. If you guys did, I'd defer to you.
I don't have a strong opinion. I prefer suffix because to me it's not about IntelliSense only. It's also about like documentation and there are many places
where things show up order. Yeah,
where things show up in order. But I have to agree that in this case, I kind of don't feel strongly.
I mean, arguably, like for task, I think we can all agree that this is not an API you should use a lot. It should be used very sparingly in cases where you want that. My hunch is that's probably true for all of these cases where we have struct-based alternatives, right? Like value tuple, for example, would we think this is used by default, or would we say, well, it kind of depends?
Well, because of the cost, I very rarely use tuple. So yes, I would use.
So for tuple, you would say you would rather have it show up next to it because you kind of want people to steer it to that. Well, that makes it harder now, right? Now, the question is, do we want them to show up side by side or not? I don't know. I think we should just pick one pattern and stick to it rather than have two different ways of doing it.
I agree. We should have one convention. My slight preference, and again, it's not strong. My slight preference is for the prefix, simply because it's how I read the C#. I read C# as it's a struct foo or a class foo. This is a value foo. Versus a task value. I think of the value as being like the T, the generic T result. It's a task of int. It's a task of value. But that's a minor thing, and it's just my mental model.
Yeah, another thing about prefix that is a bit problematic is if we have many of these types and you type value, there will be very long list of those.
Well, that's going to happen regardless. When you type value, you're going to get a long list of things that contain the word value in them.
No, the thing is that if you type task, you're only gonna see tasks, and then you can go up and down using.
I understand, but I'm saying that's the same. That's the same either way.
No, because if you type value, you may first find value activator and value. Like IntelliSense will show you many types. None of them are related to tasks. They are just the value versions of some other tasks. Some other types that happen to be, first in alphabetically sorted order, and then you have to scroll. You have to keep typing till you hit T, letter T, or you have to keep scrolling in the completion window.
I guess I'm not quite understanding. In either the suffix or the prefix case, if you type value, you're going to get a list of all the things that have value in them. If you type task, you're going to get a list of all the things that have task in them.
Correct. You have to know not to type.
Are you saying that you're just going to be more likely to type the thing at the beginning of the word?
No. I think basically people are more likely to type the actual name of the type, not a substring of the type. So if they are looking for value task, they are more likely to type value than task. Do you agree?
I agree.
Yeah, so if
But-
they type value, they will see lots of types. Basically, that's my point.
You want the more specific thing first, essentially.
Yeah, like the thing that corresponds to what they are actually looking, the higher order bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't that seem to go against though, like the standard, like stream versus stream reader? Like you want a reader for a stream.
I'm just saying, there are not that many types that start with stream, so the issue doesn't exist. In my opinion, doesn't exist there. You type stream and you see 4 types.
Yeah, I
so
think
then you just up and down arrow to the one that you want. Versus now you type value and potentially you're gonna see 1,000 types in 5 years.
Yeah, more like similar comparison. I think that's basically called out in the design guidelines are things like element, node, tree, like things that are very generic, right? And values have very generic terms. Stream is already somewhat specific, so is reader. I mean, compared to the others. But I don't know. I think I don't have a strong preference. I mean, let's just leave it at that and then make a decision. So maybe start an email thread and then close that one way or the other.
So summarize where we are. We agree we should add this. We're not quite sure on the order of the terms in the name, and not quite sure on the assembly. Is that a summary thus far?
Well, assembly, I think we're already in agreement. It's just we need to actually figure it out. I think the best.
I guess I'm not clear on how the assembly thing happens, because like if ASP.NET wanted to use this for
Yep.
V1,
Yep.
that would mean that it would have to be in desktop by then.
No, because basically we have a facade, correct, for desktop.
Sure.
And you can have, like, if it's a separate type, that facade can type forward everything to desktop except for that one type, because that would then live in that facade assembly.
So there's not, but don't we have to, doesn't that facade assembly get revved at the same rate as desktop?
No, facade is a component, correct?
Yeah, facade is just regular DLL, right? So that gets deployed. I mean, the only tricky part is if that assembly that you're trying to add already exists in desktop, then I'm not sure we can actually have it app local. There was a few issues with how that works. But for the majority of cases where we have basically a contract, but half of it is forwarded to desktop, we can add brand new types that basically only live in that assembly. We already have done it for SIMD. We have done it in other cases.
Okay, you guys know this stuff.
Yeah, it's more tricky for APIs. I mean, if you do like, does this come with any other members, or is this basically just a self-contained type and that's it?
It's a few self-contained types.
So there's no additional members you have to add to task, for example.
No.
All right, then that should be relatively straightforward. System threading tasks. Whether we can make this a partial facade. All right. Oh, for fuck's sake. All right. So so I would just mark it as approved, because the point here is not to design the feature. Right? The point is more like to approve the general fact that the API wants to be added.
And so what's the next step then?
So the next step would be we just basically figure out, like naming, I think to me is bug level work. I would just go ahead and leave it as it is for now, and then we can file a bug and rename it if we feel we want to change it to something else. I wouldn't block the work item on it.
Okay,
and,
so I should go ahead and check this in with either the names into the system threading tasks assembly in corefx, and
correct.
then we subsequently evaluate whether we can in fact update the partial facade for full framework and whether
correct.
That's the right naming.
So the other thing is Alex on Wes's team is looking into how to track work that we need to do for desktop. I think the idea is that we basically use labels on the issues, and then there's basically some review body that walks over them and makes a decision what to do with those, or that we port them to desktop or we don't port them to desktop, and if we port it, how we port them. But I think this is something more like an architectural thing. I would just ping Wes and say, like, can we make this a partial facade? And if not, why not? And if we can't make it a partial facade, then the question is, are we willing to come up with a new contract just so that we can add it to desktop, or are we living with the fact that it has to be desktop 4.8 or something? Because I agree with Christoph, like these Franken designs that we create these new contracts just so we can add it to desktop is a bit of a problem. But
I think if many features that we create are like logically they are separate features. We should just create new contracts.
Yes.
But we shouldn't twist the design.
So I mean, this is, to be clear, this isn't, and I don't have a strong preference. This isn't changing the design of the types at all. It's just a question of where they live.
Correct.
Because they sit on top of everything.
Yes.
And if we knew that we were going to add a bunch more things, then we're going to need a new assembly anyway.
Yes. But I think, I don't know. But do you have something in mind that is that we would like to add?
We've had some requests for additional asynchronous synchronization primitives. We don't have any of them, concretely yet, but we had a bunch implemented in like the parallel extensions extras package. And there's some third-party libraries that provide such things. We've had some both internal and external requests for things like an asynchronous reader-writer lock. So, if we were going to go add something like that, it can be done purely on top of existing surface area. We wouldn't want to go put it into MS Corelib, for example.
Oh no, for sure not. But my point is that I think, are they logically cohesive enough to say, I don't know, system.threading.task.foo, and then ValueTask would go in there, or are they all just additional things that, yep, some things may go in system threading tasks, some things may go into, I don't know, threading, whatever other things we have there. And I think that's probably more likely, right?
Sure.
So anyway, all right. So let's leave it at that. And so these are the two PRs you added.
Yeah. So this one, I don't know how to deal with PRs like this. So this one it's not adding public surface area, but it is adding a publicly known interface to a type, an instance of which is returned out of a public API. The goal of which being to be able to cast a type that you get back to this other interface. So this particular guy has a method called search, his own method, that takes an I-read-only list, and he wants to be able to pass a sorted lists keys collection, or sorted list keys into that. Keys returns an I list. He wants to be able to get it as an I-read-only list. So his PR, if you look at the files changed, it just adds the interface implementation.
Yeah.
But to do that, then the code that you write for corefx will only work in certain, it only work against certain implementations and not against others. So I don't know how to think through things like this.
Quite frankly, I think the value add is so low because you kind of have to know that you can cast it on an I-read-only list to begin with. And it's in a core type that changing is relatively hard because we have to touch it in at least 3 places. And on top of that, I'm not sure it doesn't have any serialization impact. I'm pretty sure it probably does in some cases. That I don't know. I don't.
So maybe I missed what's the type returned by keys?
So keys apparently returns ilist of t. So you can't change that.
I understand. Okay.
But he wants to change the instance that is internal that we return. I don't know what the instance is we return. Steven, do you know what we return there? If it's an internal type, it may be possible. If it's a public type, it's a public API change anyway.
Yeah, click on files change. You'll see it. There's a one-line
Yeah,
change.
it's here. It's a PR. Yes, I see. Oh, it's a private type. Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
So you know what? Could we instead solve it by having? Do we have an adapter from iList to I-read-only list? Because we could have an adapter instead of cast, and then we would enable these scenarios, and it actually would be safer because it would always be safer in terms of runtime.
Except that you allocate now, right? But yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah, we didn't do that. That's probably something we should have done. I don't know. My gut feel is
we have that for the concrete list, but not for iList, right? Like, don't we have list.asReadOnly or something like that?
Yeah, but that I think returns read-only collection. I don't think it returns an interface. So we don't have. Problem with the read-only interfaces is we couldn't make the existing one inherit from those, which would be the same thing to do. And there's no adapter between the two. So you basically have to, wherever you implement iList, you kind of have to implement I-read-only list now as well. Unfortunately. That was one of the biggest problems that design had.
Actually, it looks like, I mean, this doesn't solve this exact problem, but it does look like read-only collection implements iRead-only list.
Yes. Oh, I see what you're saying now. Yes, I think there's probably some cases where you could use an existing type as the adapter. That's probably true. But we also have iRead-only collections. If the only thing you have is an iCollection, you may not be able to easily wrap that in another one.
Also, I wonder whether a read-only collection, I don't remember, does it copy?
No, they are basically just views over whatever you pass in.
Okay, well, in this
right,
case,
so after it's called new read-only collection.
I think this scenario.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
It's actually much better than doing this cast that will potentially fail on some platforms.
Well, that's the other thing, right? I mean, like, first of all, you have to know that you can do it. Secondly, you would always have to be defensive, which basically defeats the purpose. Yeah. All right.
Now the thing is, maybe we should consider adding an extension method somewhere. Basically, as we don't need to list of t. Oh, it allocates, so maybe it's not the great idea, because it will be an allocation that is not very visible.
Well, the other one, there were 3 collection types: iList, read-only list.
iCollection, iList, and what?
That was the iDictionary. Yeah, I was going to say that was always 3. iDictionary. This sorted list. Yeah. Jesus. Sorted list dot keys. I swear to God, my typing is not usually that bad. All right. Anybody disagree with anything you see on the screen?
Sorry, say again.
So what you see on the screen, any major disagreements?
No, that's fine.
All right, then let's mark this as it's not an API, but I think we don't have a rejected part. Okay, then let's just close it. I guess that's probably the best way. All right.
So this one's just been sitting around for a while.
So what's the main issue? That sounds like a good idea.
Add sort comparison methods to mutable array builder. Yeah. That's another, I think, oddity in the DCL, because we have two ways to do comparisons, right? You can either have an iComparer or you can have a comparison delegate. We added in 4.5 the ability to create an iComparer from a comparison, but again, you allocate, right?
And then you call an interface every time you call.
Well, that's the only problem if you pass an iComparer, but if you pass in a delegate, then you have delegate dispatch for every single time, right? I mean, like, it's, I'm not sure how these two translate, but I guess it's, like, I think as far as I know, if you do interface dispatch in the tied loop, they host it out, so it's only a one-time lookup, because hopefully you do the same comparison.
Sort is not
But,
our sort is a very complex algorithm.
Yeah, like, that's what I'm saying. I don't know how they compare when you actually pass in a comparison versus an iComparer. I think for practical purposes, because it's so fucking hard to actually do the translation from comparison to iComparer, you have to know how to do it, because you go with comparer of t dot create comparer, like it's not great. Plus, it's so common. I would say like having an overload generally is a good idea. Steven, what's your opinion on that? I mean, I don't think we wouldn't add those. Seems pretty simple.
Yeah, this is a completely standalone assembly. We can always choose to do a more efficient implementation later rather than, doing the wrapping.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah. Are we happy with the implementation? I mean, it seems really straightforward, but.
Yeah, I mean, my feedback to Andrew has been, this is allocating, and his response of, well, if it's an issue, we'll fix it later, which I think is reasonable.
Yeah. Because he basically does what I just said.
Exactly.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, I think from a usability standpoint, I actually like the API.
By the way, the wrapper not only allocates it is an interface dispatch, and then the implementation of the interface also calls the delegate, correct?
Right, that's true. It basically doubles the number of interface calls.
Yes.
It's pretty bad, but fine, we can optimize it for you.
All right. Cool. Then I think we're good to go. Anything else you wanted to look at? Because that's the only thing you sent me in email.
Those were the main ones that I had top of mind. I don't believe there were any other PRs that were blocked on you, but we might take a quick pass through. There's a whole bunch of PRs, like half the PRs are waiting for feedback from Richard on kind of the copyright header, but hopefully we'll get word on that soon.
Yeah. I thought we made a decision on that one. At least that was mine. Anyway, so I think there's only one that's currently marked as API edition, at least on the PR side.
Yeah, I think there are a bunch on the issue side, but we don't have time in 15 minutes. We might look to see if anything jumps out at us. But
yeah, the issue with backlog is terrible. Like I really, really hope. Like I think I will cancel a bunch of meetings over the next week so I can actually sit in my office for a few hours, because I think most of it is just me reading stuff and responding. I don't think there's any other way of doing it.
if you could do that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Let me do a quick sign here. Labels, API needs work, or API. Now there's 11 open right now, so that's not bad actually. I guess the ones that are more interesting are the ones that don't have that label, right?
Yeah, we haven't been doing a very good job of keeping things attributed appropriately.
No, it's a bit better. It's 27, but yeah. Yeah. All right, I will take a pass. I think honestly, most of these things, like last time we went over that list, the problem is they're all in a similar category, as in none of them are bad. None of them are amazing enough to justify, all the ceremony around designing how we edit the desktop, making decisions where to put them. And I think most of our work is kind of blocked to have the same process around that. Because I mean, most of them, I really just want to say, yeah, looks good, because they're all like adding value somewhere. It's just that the cost is so high to actually add them that it's always a judgment call. Oh, is that particular one now worth the cost of doing it? And that seems like a bad starting point, because then you basically always start with minus 1,000 points, which for language features may be worth it, but for simple API additions, I think the cost is just disproportionate to what the value is of the APIs. All right, then I think I have it for today.
Great, thank you both.
Thanks.